Good afternoon on this Sunday, June 12th, 2011. This is your tropical weather update for the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific. Taking a quick look at the tropical weather outlooks from the National Hurricane Center, you can see all is quiet in the Atlantic Basin at the moment. They're really not highlighting any areas. And the same can now be said for the Eastern Pacific. We were monitoring what was Major Hurricane Adrian just 48 hours ago, but at this point it's now weakened below tropical depression status. The latest surface analysis also reveals a fairly quiet weather pattern across much of the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific at this time. There's really not a whole lot that stands out on this map. There are a couple weak waves over the central Atlantic, and we'll take a quick look at that. And there's also a weak monsoon trough that persists over the far northeast Pacific along into the southwest Caribbean. The latest Atlantic visible imagery shows that the Atlantic is fairly quiet. We are still looking at the remnants of 94L Invest. This was the tropical low that originated in the Caribbean. It eventually moved off toward the northeast over Cuba and the Bahamas. And as of this afternoon, it's now just west of Bermuda. As you can see, it still has a remnant low-level circulation, although it's highly ill-defined, and no development is expected from this area due to the presence of this trophiness that has been persistent off of the east coast for the past several weeks. And this is now going to become part of a much stronger non-tropical area of low pressure well into the far North Atlantic, so that'll be the last that we see of this particular storm. In the meantime, we're still tracking this fairly high amplitude tropical wave considering it's only mid-June. It's now approaching 50 degrees west longitude, and it'll be into the Eastern Caribbean within a matter of the next 1 to 3 days. It'll be worth keeping an eye on as it eventually moves into the Central and Western Caribbean, possibly the Gulf of Mexico down the road, but that's all purely speculation at this point, as that's very far in advance. None of the models really show this storm doing anything, or this wave doing much at all over the next week, but if there will be any player in the Atlantic, it'll be this one, so we'll just keep a close eye on that. One thing that is certain is that the wave will not show any signs of organization over at least the next 5 days due to the presence of this mid to upper level trough that's draped across much of the central Atlantic and into the eastern Caribbean Sea. There's a lot of dry air and southwest wind shear in this area, and the forecast model guidance keeps the wind shear fairly high across much of the Caribbean as well. As you can see, much of the Atlantic is filled with wind shear at the moment. This is the latest SIMS wind shear analysis, and there really aren't any or very many tropical areas that really have any favorable conditions at this current time. In the low levels, the subtropical ridge is still anchored across much of the Atlantic, stretching from the coast of Africa almost as far west as the Florida Peninsula, so therefore the low-level steering will guide this tropical wave well into the western Caribbean. The latest GFS shear forecast confirms the idea that upper-level conditions will remain fairly unfavorable throughout much of the basin over the next 6 to 7 days, so at the very least nothing is imminent at this current time. And finally, what was once Major Hurricane Adrian has significantly weakened over the last 48 hours. As you can see, there's nothing left but a remnant circulation that's completely void of any convection. And as expected, this will not pose any threat to any interest along the Mexican coastline. So thankfully, we've been spared out in the Eastern Pacific, and it also looks like it will remain fairly quiet out in the Eastern Pacific over the next week as well. So that is your tropical update for this Sunday. Please check again tomorrow for another updated tropical analysis.